Cinesmack contains spoilers of the spoiling type. If you don't want your spoilers spoiled, please turn back now. Otherwise, enjoy the show!
Hello, Cinesmacketeers, and welcome back to the podcast that takes your favorite films and puts them in the ring, and we discuss them, because we're filmmakers. I'm your host, Mike Keeler. Joining me, as usual, is owner of One Genome Short Productions, Mr. Gabriel Rohlwald.
That'll be the day.
Nice.
That's the best I can do.
Owner of Outpost 515 Productions, Mr. Samuel Pace Twomey.
You might have least left me my britches.
Owner of Cheshire Moon Films, Mr. Tom Haggis.
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
And our special guest this month is, he's a fan of the show, which I still don't understand, but he is also producer at Back Row Studios, Mr. Tim Nash.
Deservin's got nothing to do with it.
Nice. I like it. All right, well, I'm going to poke the monkey so we can find out what we're doing.
Ladies and gentlemen, soiled doves and cowboys, welcome to the main event. Tonight, the Old West stampedes into the ring as two legends showdown at high noon. In the first corner, from 1992, directed by Clint Eastwood, starring Clint Eastwood, Morgan Freeman, and Gene Hackman, Unforgiven. In the second corner, from 1956, directed by John Ford, starring John Wayne, Jeffrey Hunter, and Vera Miles, The Searchers!
I grew up on horse shit and gunsmoke movies, and grew up on The Searchers. I also grew up on the old spaghetti westerns, so I love both of these films, and I have to say, Unforgiven is damn good, but so is The Searchers. So I'll let you guys decide the fate of both of these films. Let's start off with our first round, which is writing.
Yeah. Searchers is, I think, almost universally considered kind of a classic. And, when a movie reaches that status, you almost have a hard time kind of like criticizing it. You expect certain things from it. But I feel like I was a little disappointed with the writing in The Searchers. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the movie a lot, but I felt like, I don't know. I felt like it just didn't really live up to the classic status to me. And I don't know if that's like a historical kind of thing. Like if I look at it in context, in historical context, like in that time period compared to other movies that came out roughly the same time, other westerns that came out roughly the same time, maybe it transcended that. But in my personal opinion, it's going to have a really hard time beating the writing in Unforgiven. I think Unforgiven is just beautifully written. The characters are so well rounded. The dialogue is great. It's just very tight, very to the point, and it definitely has a very, very clear message, but it's not too terribly preachy about it. I just think Unforgiven is really well written.
Yeah, I've always been kind of the mindset that with John Wayne movies, it's kind of like that pizza place in town where everybody in town's like, it's the best pizza place. You gotta try it. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I'll get a True Grit pan style, and you get it, and you're like, no, that wasn't as good as everybody said it was going to be, and then. Then you're like, well, I'll try Cowboys with extra cheese, and like, no, that's not working for me either. And you're like, what?
They did have a little extra cheese at times, didn't they?
Yeah, and I just, it's always been like that with John Wayne movies with me. I have yet to find one where I want to hold it up and be like, I love this movie, and I like Searchers, it's good, but I don't I guess as far as a filmmaker, it's very well shot, and it's
Yes.
beautifully framed, and the composition's great, and there's no special effects because it's very much all shot on location, done so well, but
Right.
it does not hold up very well to the Clint Eastwood and, God dare I say it, Quentin Tarantino westerns that they're making now.
Sure.
Well,
True.
okay, one question I have on the writing specifically, maybe you guys can help me on this. Why does Morgan Freeman characters choke? Why does he choke at that moment and they can't shoot anymore?
Because he's over the killing. Like, he had enough of it. And it's been so long since he's done it. He can't make himself do it again when he thought he could.
Because they're listening to that boy just die, and it's just he can't take it. Yeah.
I don't know. I thought they were setting his character up to be like the more seasoned and kind of adjusted of all of the group. Very observant and strong enough that he wouldn't have went if he was that.
Well, I think he was just he was going along because it was his friend, it was his partner. And I think the character truly thought that he could do it.
Yeah,
But-
Sam, I think there really is something to what you're saying, but I think it works for the movie because he is that guy. He's the most seasoned. He's the one that recognized the Schofield kid's blindness. He's the one that seems ready to do it. And then when the time comes, even though he seems like the most professional, the most prepared, he's the one that can't do it. Because I think there's this overarching theme, especially in Unforgiven, not in The Searchers, but in Unforgiven, there's this theme of violence and really an abhorrence to violence because you don't see a lot of violence throughout most of that movie. It's like the last third, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you also feel like maybe he's the most evolved in a certain sense that he went through that in his youth and he's transcended that now and it's no longer who he is. And like Tim said, he thinks he can do it. But when it comes down to the time to do it, to kill another person, especially really what is kind of presented as a relatively innocent young man. Of course, his character might not necessarily know how innocent he was, but I think he's just more evolved morally than some of the others. His age has made him a little bit, a little more lenient and a little more abhorrent to violence.
Sure, and I do think that Unforgiven is wonderfully written. Was it David Webb Peoples, I believe, was the writer credit on that?
Yeah, David.
Yep, you are correct.
I liked it. The only reason I'm questioning some of these things is like it felt at times, I don't know. Unforgiven is fun in that it doesn't mince words. It talks about big dicks and small dicks and masturbation and like all this stuff that kind of makes us all equal no matter what we've done in the past. So I thought that was good there. As far as I know, Gabe, you had said it's really tight. I think it's a little long. It comes in 131 minutes. I think there was some way they could have tightened the end of the story so it wasn't as obvious of a pivot from here's this scene, okay, he's dead, now he's going to kill him, that kind of thing. And I think it's fascinating, Gene Hackman's character, how at first I don't necessarily see him as a villain. Maybe just like he's a strong arm. I don't necessarily foresee that he's going to like warrant death, which is kind of interesting to see him do that. So.
Right. Well, there's definitely gray area to the characters. They're not black and white, and that's one of the things I like about the writing is that these characters they're not archetypes. They're not caricatures. They're actually fully realized people to a certain degree. And yeah, Gene Hackman is like, well, yeah, is he really a villain? Or is he really just a strong lawman who's enforcing law in the only way he can in that time period, or is he power drunk and is he overstepping his bounds? And so there's that gray area there. It's hard to know, and the same goes for William Money, Clint Eastwood's character. It's like, is he really this ruthless villain that they're talking him up to be. He seems different now. He seems more caring, more polite, a little less prone to violence naturally. And so it's not black and white with these characters. It's not good guy, bad guy. It's like very well-rounded people to a certain degree.
Sure, and I think it's funny that the title is Unforgiven when the story is almost all about redemption and kind of coming to terms. And from the fast blurb at the end, he does good, he makes out good in dry goods. So it's like, and by the way, he sold a lot of goods. So.
Yeah, after he killed all these people, he did okay. The other interesting thing that one of the things I enjoyed the first time I saw it is that they're building up this legend of William Money, like all these people have heard of him and his exploits and that kind of thing, and they even do things where the kid tells a story that he heard. Oh, I heard you killed these two guys had the drop on you and you killed them both, and then later on Morgan Freeman's character comes in and says, "That's not how I remember it. I remember it being 3 people," and they're like building up this legend. But it's not only building up the legend of that character. You feel like it's building off of the film legend of Clint Eastwood himself. Yeah. Like they're taking kind of this Clint Eastwood kind of mythology and using it in the context of this film and kind of building it up. And you're just waiting for that version of Clint Eastwood to appear, the badass Clint Eastwood, instead of this kind of aging, clumsy, old gunfighter that we see through most of the movie.
What's so interesting when you're saying that, though, is, and I thought you were going to mention this, I was waiting for you to say it, but every time somebody talks about something he did, and they're like, "Hey, yeah, you did, how'd you do that?" Or he always says, "I don't remember." He never remembers his own exploits. I think it was because he was drunk most of the time, is what he said. He doesn't
True.
remember anything that he did.
Oh, yeah, or yeah, that's funny. Yeah, other people, like the world remembers, but he doesn't.
Right, and that's why at the end he tells the kid to take a drink, because that's the only way he could deal with the horribleness. And that arc of that character and the way he killed the shit out of that guy on the shitter,
killed the shit out.
I could see it was a great evolution of that character. I mean, totally. I guess the writing in Unforgiven is just a lot more advanced than I think. Searchers was about strong American performances and Vista Vision and
yeah. If you look at the Searchers, and I mean, I was watching it, and my favorite John Wayne movie is The Quiet Man. I love The Quiet Man. Mm-hmm. And watching the Searchers, I'm listening to the dialogue, the characters, and it sounds like The Quiet Man. And so I looked it up, and Frank Nugent was like John Ford's guy. So he wrote, She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, Fort Apache. I mean, it was really written inside the studio system. I think Frank Nugent just phoned it in and didn't really, I don't know. I just felt like it was very canned. It was very John Ford.
Yeah, I liked John Wayne's character in that he was kind of an anti-hero. He was like Clint Eastwood's character in Unforgiven, in that he wasn't necessarily a good man. He clearly had some things in his past that he that maybe were questionable and maybe he wasn't proud of, and those kinds of things. But I liked how they built up his character, and I like how they left a little bit of mystery to it. They didn't explain everything in great detail about who he was and where he had been and what he had done and those kinds of things. And I kind of liked that part of the writing is that the building of that character and the mystery around it.
No, I if I can speak up, I'll agree. And I think, John Wayne, Ethan's character in The Searchers, the reason we chose Unforgiven versus The Searchers is you're dealing with 2, anti-heroes, as you said, Gabe. And I think the whole idea of naming Unforgiven is because he goes back to his old ways. Like, it's the fact that he changed for a while, but he's still that guy. You know, he can put on a different suit, but underneath he is still that murderer. He is still a killer. And I think it still goes with, you know, Ethan's character in The Searchers. He is still not a good guy. He's just trying to get something done. And that's the journey that we're on with him.
Yeah, and you wonder why he's so obsessed with that task in The Searchers.
Oh, I can tell you why. I have
it's not necessarily to find it's not necessarily to find the girls. I mean, that's the reason.
Yeah.
You know, that's the explicit reason, but you just feel like there's some sort of, you know, it's almost kind of a racism that he's out to get. He's not out to find the girls. He's out to get the Comanche Indians that took her.
And I'm going to tell you why. In
Revenge.
Piece of trivia that
okay.
It's pretty hard to pick out, but it's there, and I'll tell you guys why. But
okay.
Does anyone else have anything they would like to say about the writing of either two films?
I think that the the themes that run through Unforgiven are what it's like a kind of a masterclass in screenplay writing and screenwriting, and I just think that there's all of these tiny lines, and even the name of the town, Big Whiskey, and it's just this. It's so well thought out and so well executed. From just it's rare to see a script like this where every line just seems like it fits so perfectly. And I mean, of course, I'm talking in dialogue, less about the plot. Whereas The Searchers, you know, there's just it kind of jumps around from, you know, there's some silliness to it. There's a lot of racism that's really hard to watch anymore. So I you know, that's the biggest thing for me, is just that I think Unforgiven is so well thought out, and it seems weird to me that more movies can't hit that perfect chord when it comes to screenplays, but I mean, Unforgiven does. It's one of my favorites. So
yeah, speaking of, and maybe we can get into this in the overall, maybe we should save it, but it's the topic of racism is kind of an interesting one to go into, you know, and how much of it was just flat out like racism, and how much of it was actually there to draw your attention to racism.
Right.
You know, and at that time, who knows? Well, you know, because you know, I think of another Western movie that we did, you know, Blazing Saddles, and you know, that's clearly. I mean, if you watch that without really realizing it's an indictment of that kind of racism, you'd be like, oh my God, this is the most racist movie ever. You know, and so I wonder that about, you know, what you guys think about that in The Searchers. You know, is it truly racism, or are we supposed to, you know, I don't know.
I don't buy into it that it's truly racism. I think it's the racism of the time, of the time period they're trying to show.
Right.
True.
And that's why I've always loved Blazing Saddles, is because it throws mud in the eye of all that racism, like to the fact that it makes it funny. Like they are just outright mocking the Western genre, and I think that's why it works so well for me. Yeah, and I wondered that too. You know, if it was, you know, if it was intentionally showing, the kind of the racial tension of the time period, or you know, if it was something else, if it was truly racism that was embedded even at the time in 1956 in our culture.
Yeah, I think it was 56. I think some of it was just product of the time that no one thought it was racism. It was just how everybody was talking and referring to, you know, like blanket heads and lots of talk, you know, quotes like, they look white. I think it was, it's hard to believe they're white. They aren't white anymore after they were the captors that had been living with they call them Cherokees.
Comanche. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you also have to take into account that Ethan was fighting on the Confederate side, and then
that's interesting.
I thought that was fascinating.
And then went down and fought in the Mexican-American War. So
definitely. Yeah, that's definitely interesting too.
I think, once again, I think it's also showing the time period, and how that character feels about anyone that is not white.
Right.
So, is there anything else? Tim, Tom, Sam, Gabe, anything?
No, but I think we'll probably come back to the racism thing a little bit later. So
Okay. In The Searchers, a significant portion of the film's labyrinthian plot is revealed on a throwaway prop that most casual viewers rarely notice. This one's for you, Gabe. Just before the Indian raid on the Edwards homestead, the tombstone of Ethan's mother that Debbie hides next to reveals the source of Ethan's glaring hatred for Comanches. The marker reads, "Here lies Mary Jane Edwards, killed by Comanches May 12th, 1852, a good wife and mother in her 41st year." And to be honest, I've seen this movie, I don't know, at least 8 times, and I have never noticed that.
Yeah, I know the tombstone you're talking about, but I would have never been able to read all of that in that period, in the amount of time it was on the screen.
And the script for Unforgiven floated around Hollywood for nearly 20 years, during which time Gene Hackman read and rejected it, only to be later convinced by Clint Eastwood, who had owned the rights to the script for some time, to play a role.
That's something I once put in my biography, that at one point I was convinced by Clint Eastwood to do something.
No doubt, right?
Even it's just like buying a Snicker bar. That'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Tom,
You're
Damn
hungry,
it,
aren't you?
Gene, you're gonna do the goddamn movie. You're gonna make a shit ton of money.
When you get
All
hungry,
right.
you kind of turn into a John Wayne.
Tom, are you feeling lucky?
No, that's why I'm hungry.
All right, well, let's move on to the second category, which is acting.
Wait, we never even voted on the first one.
Oh, shit.
I mean, I'm happy to
right.
move on.
I think we know.
That's right.
I think we know.
I think I already know, but let's go through it. Gabe.
Unforgiven.
Sam.
Unforgiven.
Tom.
Unforgiven.
Tim.
Unforgiven.
All right. There we go. Now let's move on to acting.
Well, I think acting easily goes to Unforgiven as well. I'm going to cut some of my remarks short because I felt that Eastwood gave the actors ample ground to kind of do their thing. And, as he focused on directing and starring, he kind of created this atmosphere with these wonderful actors to work their craft. And Morgan Freeman is great. I've always loved Gene Hackman, even if he is playing a kind of, a villain at some points and a strict, tough man. Obviously he played that, in other films, but it was great. It was a great ensemble. And I think when you look at The Searchers at the time, John Wayne has a style of acting, and I think it's mostly muted yelling at some points. But I mean, it to me, it was much broader, and obviously, the films of the time were, played much bigger than they would be played today. But I thought it was kind of caricature out there, especially with the Indians, who some of them were Chinese and some were African American that were playing these parts, and it just looked weird. Like just some of the casting, I thought, especially for the ethnic parts, was very kind of strange. But that's all.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, the performances in Unforgiven are strong all the way around. Like even the bit characters are good, and the actor who played the Schofield kid, you feel like it wouldn't be that hard to play that kind of tough guy, kind of like, or that pseudo kind of tough guy character and that kind of thing. But then he really shows his mettle at the end after he's killed the guy and he's like regretting it and that kind of thing. I think that his performance there is really just great. So yeah, I think all around Unforgiven, like you said, Sam, just spectacular. Now John Wayne kind of has his style, but I did feel like this was an excellent performance by John Wayne in The Searchers. It was a little bit different for him in that he was so angry all the time. And most of his characters aren't that way. You know, they're always kind of like tough guy kind of thing, but they're not necessarily so angry and full of hate. And I felt like it was a departure for him, and I felt like it was a good role for him throughout. But some of the other characters, his sidekick, Martin, I just didn't think he was that good. He kind of had the look, and I don't know if he had the look because of makeup or if he was truly kind of like, part Indian or part Hispanic or something. I'm not quite sure. But I just didn't really think he was that great of an actor overall. And most of the other performances were pretty spotty, And then there were just this really kind of there were these attempts at humor that I felt kind of fell flat. And I don't know if it was the timing of them or the performance of them. But overall, I just didn't feel like the performances in The Searchers were what I was expecting.
I will give credit to Ken Curtis. I thought he was pretty funny as Charlie. He's one of the highlights. And Ward Bond as the Reverend Captain, I thought was pretty awesome too in The Searchers. Those are two characters that I always like, and I never felt like they got enough screen time in The Searchers, because they are kind of playing that caricature characters. But I thought, I don't know, Gene Hackman is so awesome, and it makes me so mad that he's not making movies anymore. And I've written President Obama and asked him to make Gene Hackman's laugh a national monument, because I think Gene Hackman's chuckle is the best thing in the world. If I could find some way to make it my ringtone, I would, because I don't know. I think he is the dog's bullocks, as they say.
Is that a compliment? I don't know.
No, bollocks is bad. Bollocks means bullshit, but the dog's bollocks is good.
Oh, okay. All right.
So, when something's the dog's bollocks, it's good.
Okay, I'll let him decide if he likes that or not.
I don't know. He's not returning my calls.
He might now.
No, I just I think my biggest thing here, and I don't know if you guys will judge me for this or not, but I just have to say, in watching Unforgiven, I agree with performances all around. Generally, I think the acting was superior, except for, I have to say it, I watched this movie and I was about 15 minutes in and I said to myself, Clint Eastwood can't act. Clint Eastwood can't act to save his life. And so I think I have to say that if you're comparing movies, I think that, which we are, clearly, that for Unforgiven, the entire cast is better than The Searchers. But if you put John Wayne next to Clint Eastwood, I say John Wayne wins out in the acting for this, because I just think he had to show more range. And whenever in Unforgiven, there's a couple moments where Eastwood has to show a little bit of range. It's not much. He's going very minimal, which I know is an important thing, and it's kind of a thing to go minimal and not go big like they did back in the era of The Searchers. But God, he just can't really emote. It's that gravelly. I don't know. I just was really disappointed in Clint Eastwood's acting overall. I mean, everything else is fantastic, but I really was disappointed in Eastwood's acting for Unforgiven. But aside from that, I like the characters of The Searchers because it's those John Ford characters. The guy that plays the preacher captain, I really enjoyed his character, and it's because it was a familiar character. It wasn't anything that I'd never seen before, but I just really enjoyed that character, and I thought he did it well. And Gene Hackman, the first time I heard we were doing Unforgiven versus The Searchers, I think of Unforgiven, and I think of two lines. It's, I was building a house, and I immediately hear him yell in my head. I hear that, misfire, kill the son of a bitch. It pops into my head whenever I think of Unforgiven. So it's not even Eastwood's lines, it's Hackman's lines that pop into my head when I think of that.
No, you got a good point, Tim. I still quote Eastwood's lines, but I mean, I do remember Gene Hackman's lines. Did we lose him?
No.
What about
okay.
What about Morgan Freeman asking Clint Eastwood about masturbating?
Yeah, that's
You
fantastic.
just use your hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're left hanging. We don't get to find out if he's gherkin
Yeah.
the old Western gherkin, but
I did like Morgan Freeman's kind of incredulousness to what do you do? He's just incredible. Can't believe what.
Yeah.
I do like that. And I think also, I mean, that shows the different time periods that both these films are made in. You wouldn't catch a masturbation joke back in the 50s.
No.
Yeah, I enjoyed the back and forth between Eastwood and Freeman wholeheartedly. Does anyone have anything else to add for acting?
Yeah, I just think it's amazing they stuck a German American in the role of Scar. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
There were a lot of bad casting choices in The Searchers, but like you couldn't find an actor with some Native American background.
Yeah, and what was the... I thought they might explain why he had blue eyes. I thought maybe he wasn't going to be like, full Native American or something. There was going to be some story, and that's why he could speak English so well, or
Right.
something. It's like, as far as I know, it's not common for like full-blooded Native Americans to have blue eyes.
I don't think it is, but it looks like this guy was in a lot of Westerns, and he also played a lot of Indians. So I don't know. I don't know if it's just the studio system back then. I mean, they took Eli Wallach for the Magnificent Seven, and made him the leader of the Mexican group of bad guys. And it's just, to me, it's just something that they did back then. I agree. I think they should have had an Indian performer there, an Indian American that could, make you buy that. Now looking at it in 2015,
Right.
well, I think we also should give a shout out to the actor that played Moses in The Searchers.
Yes.
His
Mose.
Mose.
Yeah.
His name was Hank Worden, and I guess he was born in Iowa in 1901.
Really?
And yeah,
Nice.
and his performance is just fun. Like it kind of brings out the best of Ford's silent directing days when he was telling pictures with characters and not necessarily words, which we'll get to in further categories. But his performance with his eyes and just, it's a kind of a bit part, but it's highly memorable. And I really enjoyed that. And to find out he's an Iowan, I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, that character is actually based off of a Mad Mose, a legendary half-crazed Indian fighter that was really around apparently back then in the Southwest. So it's kind of loosely based on a real person.
I also wanted to give a shout out to, I can't remember his name. I think it's Saul something. The guy that played Mr. Beauchamp in Unforgiven. Love that character actor. And, I like it anytime you get a character actor and he's in the midst of really amazing actors. So you got Eastwood, who I just said wasn't an actor, but regardless. You got Eastwood, you got Freeman, you got Richard Harris in there, you got Gene Hackman, and then you got, you got this guy who plays this writer who I think does a really outstanding job.
Yeah.
And kind of in his journey from Richard Harris to English Bob to Little Bill, and then finally he sees the real thing he's always been looking for,
Right.
Eastwood, and the way that he watches Eastwood ride out of town is like that complete look of awe. And I really think that in that movie, he kind of is the audience in the film. Like he's like we've been hearing all these stories, and this is the real thing. Kind of. I mean, I think that the audience is supposed to kind of relate to him, I guess, and I think he did a great job.
I agree. I like that character as well. And that's a good point. All right, boys.
Well, thank you, Mike.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that guy's name is Saul Rubinek. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
always loved him as the movie producer in True Romance. Like that was my favorite.
That's
performance
right.
of his.
Oh,
Yeah, the Coca.
yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Like he nails it. I love that guy.
Yeah.
All right, boys, let's put it to a vote. Sam,
Unforgiven.
Tom,
Unforgiven.
Tim,
Kevin.
and Gabe.
Yeah, Unforgiven.
All right. According to Clint Eastwood in a 2000 interview, Gene Hackman was very concerned about how they were going to show the violence in the movie. Owing to the rising gun violence in American cities, Eastwood, a lifelong supporter of gun control, assured Hackman that the film wouldn't glorify gun violence. And I don't think it really did. You know, there weren't any large shootouts. It was essentially you shoot someone, they usually die.
Yeah, or they're painfully
wounded.
injured.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it definitely didn't glorify the gun violence.
No, it's not.
You know, it kind of glorified, you know, Clint Eastwood's character at the end, but not necessarily the violence that he was inflicting.
Right.
Because it looked, you know, it wasn't graphic, but it looked, you know, it was fairly realistic, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting that, I mean, if you're on a spectrum, at one end you've got John Ford's, you know, Western violence, and at the other end you've got Quentin Tarantino's, and you know, I really don't know where we go from there.
Well, I think I think Unforgiven is a good mix of both those worlds. You know, there's not the horrific violence of Tarantino, and there's no bullet hole on that guy violence of 1950s Western. And I don't know. I like that. And one thing I remember first watching Unforgiven, I was like, oh my God, they're going to show Gene Hackman's face, like after he shoots him. Because he was always having, remember he always mentioned that he saw
those
the guy
dreams.
dead. Yeah.
Right, but you knew as a filmmaker they weren't going to show it because what the audience is thinking is going to be way worse than anything they can show.
Agreed. Now I do.
Right.
But you know, back when I first saw the film, I was thinking that. And I agree, Sam. I mean, now as a filmmaker, I look at it and I'm like, oh yeah, that's way better than showing it. Which I think sometimes it gets in the way of my Tarantino stuff, but that's for another day. Western star Harry Carey died in 1947. Director John Ford cast Carey's wife, Olive Carey, as Miss Jorgensen, the mother, and Carey's son, Harry Carey Jr., as one of the sons, Brad, as a tribute to Carey. In the closing scene with John Wayne, framed in the doorway, Wayne holds his right elbow with his left hand in a pose that Carey fans would recognize as one that he often used. Wayne later stated that he did it in tribute to Carey. Off camera, Olive watched. So it was kind of a nod to a good friend of theirs. And I know Harry Carey was in a lot of films with John Wayne, and so was his son, Harry Carey Jr. I mean, just growing up, I always remember my dad saying, oh, there's Harry Carey Jr. You know, just picking him out of a crowd, whether it was just a bit part or...
He's the Cub fan of the Bud. Everybody.
Is that your Bill Cosby impersonation?
It could be both.
Maybe,
Kinda.
yeah, kind of fits.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to directing.
Oh, so we get to talk about the uneven history of Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
He's somebody that, you know, it's funny because, you know, it seems like every December there's like, and here comes another Clint Eastwood movie, and the guy just won't stop working, and it's very impressive. But I think I don't remember the last time, and I haven't seen American Sniper. I mean, I'll put that out there, but I not remember the last time I've seen a movie that he directed that I absolutely just, you know, went, you know, tits over noggin for. So, I'm just looking at his movies now, and I'd have to go back to Mystic River. Was the last one that I really, really, really loved. But
Really?
yeah. I mean, Hereafter was okay, and Gran Torino was all right. But I mean, Gran Torino, it's funny.
Gran Torino's pretty good.
Oh, man, that's a good movie. Sorry,
Yeah,
go ahead.
and
I enjoyed that.
it's really funny because Gran Torino, it seems like it was almost kind of a retread of Unforgiven. The way that the plot rolls down. So
yeah, but they kind of added the whole kind of Christian theme to it, though.
Yeah.
In Gran Torino, kind of.
Yeah, and they told some of the blatant racism from the Searchers. So it's a large quilt. It's a large quilt. John Ford, on the other hand, I think when I think back to what it must have been like to be shooting at these extremely remote locations. And I mean, now we have generators, and we have batteries that last hours at a time, and it seems like being able to shoot out there for a movie like The Searchers, I don't understand how they did it, and it's amazing that they were able to shoot with the continuity and the visual. The visuals that John Ford put together is amazing to me. I almost have to give it to The Searchers because I think it's The Searchers, in terms of direction and telling the story visually, I feel like if I was watching Unforgiven with the sound off, and this is kind of what we talk about sometimes, I feel like if I was watching The Searchers with the sound off, I would have a much easier time following it because of how good John Ford was at putting his movie together, telling the story through the frame, and especially westerns. So,
right, and that's what he did before sound even came in. He was telling stories in long takes of cowboys riding off into sunsets and saying things without title cards, and like to me, like this is some of the best work he is doing at that point, which I think it's overshadowed sometimes because everyone's like, oh, it's another John Wayne picture, and shot in Arizona. So especially at the time, people kind of glossed over it. But I think you're right in that I think John Ford opens it up.
Yeah, it'd be a great western if fucking John Wayne wasn't in it.
Oh man.
I'm sorry, but I don't feel that the movie gains anything by him being in it. I feel like he is this 50-foot cardboard cutout of a cowboy, and he gets in the way. I think there's a better story told there if he wasn't in it. So there, I said it.
Wow.
I guess I understand what you're saying, but I completely disagree with you.
Well, thank you.
I thought there was a few things that were kind of odd to me. First, there was this kind of tinted shot. I don't know if it was supposed to represent a night shot, like a day for night.
Oh
shot.
Yeah, that's bad.
Yeah. That happens a couple times in The Searchers, and it was horrible. Like the rest of the film was so beautiful from that wonderful big VistaVision grain that they shot. The aspect ratio was huge, and so most of it looks great. But then those scenes are like that looks horrible, and they do it like 3 different times in the movie.
Yeah.
Now, Sam, you remember you asked me on our recent film shoot if I've ever shot day for night, and that's one of the reasons is. Growing up with these older films, I've watched some really bad day for night stuff, and I totally agree that The Searchers had some pretty bad day for night. I mean, blatantly obvious.
Yeah.
Day for night. It really detracted from the majority of the cinematography, which is just beautiful, and I'm sure. The picture was shot right. It's that the effect that they were going for just muddied it down so bad that it looked like a blue mess.
Oh, right. And also, I mean, just like Tom said, being out in the wilderness like that, maybe they couldn't set up, the lights necessary, or it was just cheaper to shoot the day for night. But I totally agree with you. That does bother me.
Well, and they also shot, obviously, on sound stages for some stuff. Like some of the sound stage, like swamp and snow stuff, was obviously sound stage.
I love that
so
snow stuff.
Why don't they just shoot some of those night exteriors in there where they can control it and have the sand element?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
You brought up, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but you brought up one of my favorite John Ford shots, and it is that studio snow set. I love the look of that. I don't know why. I am drawn to that. And whenever I think of The Searchers, I think of that scene, that snow scene, and it sticks with me. Don't know why, but I dig it a lot. Sorry, go ahead, guys.
Well, I was just going to say, if we're talking about scenes that really stick with you in that movie, I think that one of my favorite scenes in in that movie is the Indian raid at the beginning of the movie when it's the family and it's the Edwards family. You know, they've gone off to who is it? Marty and Ethan have gone off to chase the Indians. They're in there alone in the cabin, and the Indians are going to come attack. And that's I don't know, that scene is really, really scary to me, because you know it's just that family and these Indians are coming and they're all themselves, and that is told. I don't know. It's so good, and the way that the mom tells her not to light the candle for dinner yet, and then like 10 seconds later she comes with the candle anyway, and she knocks the candle out of her hand, and then you have that close up where she screams. I just think that scene's awesome.
Yeah, I don't. Talking like about the cinematography, I feel like, I watched Unforgiven and I get in there and I assume that it's like Roger Deakins or, Conrad Hall or somebody that's really made themselves known, because it's really quality work in Unforgiven. I don't want to take away from that because I think Searchers is really well shot. But then I get in there and I see it's Jack Green who did 50 First Dates and The 40-Year-Old Virgin and these really this odd selection of movies that he does. And I think Unforgiven's beautifully shot. Particularly, I love the night shots. And to compare the night shots in Unforgiven, where in Unforgiven, they used absolutely bare lighting to shoot to light the night shots, and I thought that was really well done too. So
yeah, there was a lot of overhead lighting when they were outside. A big rig with a big crane with some lights on it to simulate the moonlight, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, and I like some of the indoor stuff where that you would the light would kind of silhouette their face, and then everything else would fall off into black.
Yes.
Yeah. So well done.
And it's like, wow, I wish I knew how to do that so well. So you can still get detail on the face, but then everything else just kind of falls off into this darkness that, and there's definitely some beautiful stuff in Unforgiven. But you definitely can't question that the cinematography in The Searchers is just gorgeous. I mean, some of those landscapes. And I even while watching Unforgiven, I was like, where do they find these landscapes these days? And are they real anymore?
Calgary was where Unforgiven was shot.
Really?
Yeah. Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Okay.
Yep. And sorry, Gabe, but most of The Searchers was shot in Monument Valley.
Monument
Utah.
Valley.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I wondered, did they? There's one scene where they come up to the house. What was the Martin's love interest? Lori?
Lori.
Oh, yeah.
Jurgensen.
Yeah, they come up to their house, and there's that gorgeous, like, rock formation in the background. And I was like, did they build a house? Did they build a house set right there in front of that thing? Because that's the only way I could think of that they would have done it. And I just feel like it's a remarkable accomplishment, some of the stuff that they did for The Searchers. A lot of those scenes where they had large numbers of people. Nowadays we know that they can kind of fake that up. They get a small group of people and then they digitally duplicate them or, add people digitally, that kind of thing. But, those scenes where they had large numbers of Indians attacking or, the
Buffalo
cavalry
Stampede was crazy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And did they really shoot that buffalo? It looked like they really shot a bison or whatever.
It did. At first I thought it was like, is this stock? Especially when they were all running away. And then it was like, no, they herded all these fucking buffalo.
Yeah.
That's
ridiculous.
Yeah. I just think there's amazing accomplishments they don't really bring attention to in the movie. It's not like, oh, hey, look what we did. It's just like, this is what it would have been like. And it was just, everything about it was grand. And it's really, to me, it's truly an amazing accomplishment what they did. And it's also interesting to watch some of the scenes where they have a large number of like people and horses and it's an action scene. And you're like, oh, that guy fell down. Oh, I think that guy might have actually got trampled for real.
Right.
And I don't think that was supposed to happen, but they just left it in there because they probably couldn't, get get that shot again, and it was. I just thought it was amazing in so many respects.
There's like a scene where the horse falls into the river or something. And he falls off the horse. Yeah.
It's like, well, I wonder how many. Do we have any stats on how many people were injured or killed during the filming of those scenes?
I'm looking for it to see if there's any. So you guys keep going. I'll see if I can find anything.
The one other thing too that I want to say about the Searchers is that, and I'll be interested to see 50 years from now if there's a case like this for Clint Eastwood. But the shot of Ethan standing in the doorway, silhouetted at the end of the movie, I don't know if I'm trying to think of other situations where it's really that is the summation of John Ford's career. You know, the idea of loneliness and the frontier and the standing at the threshold of, you know, the domestic family and not being able to enter into that, because of the reservations that he has. And that, I mean, how often do you have that where there's a still or a frame from a director's, the millions of frames the directors shoot that sums up their career and the ideology that they represent, there's probably a couple from Spielberg, the E.T. finger touch, that kind of thing. But I don't know if I think that I would like to know. I know you can't ask him, but if John Ford knew when he was shooting that shot that it would outlet. I mean, I think it's probably more popular than the movie itself. I mean, people see that and they know what it is and what it represents, but a lot of people couldn't tell you what movie it's from. So,
right. And I also like how the Searchers was bookended in that way, because the beginning of the movie, if you remember, was a shot from inside looking out, and
door opens.
The door opens, and then I don't remember which character it was standing in the doorway. One of the female characters was standing in the doorway.
Martha, I think it was Martha.
Yeah, so she walked out into that grand landscape. She kind of emerged from inside to the outdoors, and then the end, at the end it was kind of the reverse. Everyone was coming back in from that, except like you mentioned, Ethan's character.
It wasn't. I liked that bookend. I thought it was nice.
Now, also, I John Ford got some great imagery, but I enjoyed the wide open space that they were able to show in Unforgiven. I mean, I love those mountains, the snow white peaks, and then the shots of the town, the small little town, and behind it this huge mountain range, I'm not taking away from John Ford at all, but
yes,
give a little bit of love to Unforgiven just for that fact. I mean, they were still able to grab some epic looking backgrounds, but I don't think we're going to see in a lot of westerns, like Tombstone, and it doesn't come along till Kevin Costner with Dances with Wolves and Open Range, where you see these beautiful shots, something similar to what John Ford would capture.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing I did find unique in Clint Eastwood and some of his shots in Unforgiven is that he wasn't afraid to lock it down. He didn't have to overly move, or even in shots that he did have movement, he didn't make it so that it was always so abrupt. He got some tremendous framed, very still shots, and I really appreciated that. And I thought the Searchers, obviously, they were working with these huge cameras and this huge format, very foreign to them at the time, and it was some good basic movement shots, but for the conditions they were shooting in too. I think Tom had talked about that, and Gabe as well. Like, it was really harsh to be filming on film stock with all that dust and sand and just immense landscapes they were shooting with a heavy ass camera.
Yeah,
I'm sure that
something that could probably only sit on a tripod.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Oh, crazy.
Speaking of the bookends, I really liked Unforgiven because they do a pretty nice bookend on that one too, where it starts out, it's the silhouette of the cabin, and it's got that little, kind of forward where it talks about, it's not even Eastwood's character, it's the main character in that little piece of text that rolls up. It's his dead wife.
Right.
And then it makes that statement, and then the movie rolls, and then at the end, it's the exact same shot, and it talks about this woman's mother and how she came to visit her grave and found that they moved to San Francisco, and like, I mean, it was just so weird how they started with. I mean, it was like two separate stories, and this was like a side. You know, the whole movie was the side plot of the fact that this mother was pissed off that her daughter married this, thief and murderer. I mean, I just thought that was interesting. How, I mean, the decision that they needed to do that is just I puzzle over it, and it makes it really, really intriguing to me.
Amanda came home and I was catching the tail end of Unforgiven as I was watching it for the podcast, and she sat down, and that end, scene came up with the scrolling, and I just looked at her and I said, "Look at that. Just look at that shot." I agree with you, Tim. I think it's beautiful. My only problem with that is the text at the beginning and at the end. Originally, it was supposed to be narrated in the script, but Clint Eastwood decided no narration, just text, which, if it was mine, I probably would have had it narrated, but since it was Clint's and I don't have an Oscar, then yeah, he made the correct choice for him. But I don't know. It's the whole got to read the movie,
So the question there, Mike, is who would have read it?
Exactly.
Like, who would have narrated?
Oh, I'm thinking
John Larroquette from Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I'm thinking like Robert Mitchum
and dropped books.
Pull Robert Mitchum in.
Awesome. I think it would have been awesome if Saul Rubinek had narrated.
Oh yeah, so you would have had the writer, right?
Yeah, exactly. That would be an easy fix. Like that totally is perfectly great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. So I was going to save this for the last category, but I have a huge pet peeve when movies. If you go through movies, like every single movie out there has a writer character, and I understand that movies are written, and it's the writer knowing what they know. You're supposed to write what you know, and writers why do writers have to continually keep injecting themselves into movies? I mean, like every movie has a writer in it, and I know that they have like this noble tradition of telling the story and passing it on, and this is what this guy was doing. He's like my grandfather. I'm like, dude, come on, let's think outside the box a little bit here and find another way to move the story forward than with the writer character, because they're everywhere. I love getting to the end of a movie and go, hey, that movie didn't have a writer in it. So anyway, there you go. That's my rant I was saying for the last category. So we'll see you guys next month.
But since you brought it up,
yeah, I'm sorry, I couldn't hold it back any longer.
All right. Well, anything else you want to add for directing? Nope. All right. Let's put it to a vote. Tom.
I'm gonna give it to John Ford, my man.
All right. Gabe.
Yeah, I think in this category, I think Clint Eastwood is an excellent director, and I think Unforgiven is beautifully directed. But I don't know how I could not give it to John Ford in The Searchers.
All right. Sam?
Searchers.
All right. And Tim?
Yeah, yep, Searchers gets it.
All right. Now I've got to go back to... Oh, there it is. Reportedly, The Searchers was seen in the theater in Texas by Buddy Holly and his friends in the summer of 1956. They were so impressed with Ethan's repeated use of the phrase, "That'll be the day," that they used it as a title for their now standard rock song, which they composed soon after. Now, it is IMDb trivia, so you might be able to take that with a grain of salt. Most of the rain in Unforgiven was specially created because Calgary, where it was shot, was experiencing a dry spell, though the snowfall that is featured when William Money is recovering from his beating was unexpected and unscripted.
Yeah, and actually, my girlfriend watched it with me, and she said she mentioned that part of it. She's like, "Well, why did it? How did it snow so quickly? Because it was kind of like it looked like warm, almost desert-like, and then all of a sudden there's snow.
Snow, right?
Yeah, and that did seem in that it seemed a little out of place. And that was another interesting thing, and I'm sure it was there to indicate the passage of time, but that was an interesting thing in The Searchers too. How it went from, they're out in the desert and then all of a sudden they're riding their horses through snowdrifts that are, almost as tall as the horse.
Right.
And, and I'm sure that was there to indicate, a passage of time.
Right. And they were traveling all over trying to find the girls. Yep.
Right.
And Gabe, bring that up. You brought it up, that the use of that letter that he sends to Lori, and she reads that letter, and that's like 15 minutes of the movie, and that's the way they show the passage of time through that letter.
Yeah.
So, I think that's really great.
Does that count as a writer?
Yeah, I saw Tom laugh. I think
a letter writer?
That was lazy storytelling, is what that was.
Oh, it's a tool.
All right, let's move on to overall.
Overall, I mean, I think that when you look at both movies, I think Unforgiven was made and written to be kind of a deconstruction of the traditional Western. Clint Eastwood's character we know right away that he's this, he's got this history, but he's pretty ineffective throughout the entire movie until it's time for them to start killing, and then he gets a little bit. He's okay at it. I'm thinking specifically when they kill the first guy, the kid, and it takes him like I think it takes him 3 shots before he actually gets the kill shot in on him, and he's really ineffective until that end, and then he gets drunk, and then he's good, and he can kill people again, and I think it's just really interesting how. I think that's a really interesting piece to the film about how he's just kind of really ineffective, but he's supposed to be doing the right thing. So he's sober. He's gone back to. He's a terrible pig farmer. He leaves his kids home alone in the wilderness. He's supposed to be doing all the right things, but he's really, really bad at it. And then when he goes back to drinking and he lets the anger take over and he becomes vengeance, then it's like he does what he was always supposed to do, and he kills everybody in that bar. So I think that's a really interesting theme of Unforgiven. With The Searchers, kind of everybody talks about Ethan Edwards and who he is. I just think those 2 character studies are really interesting. I won't put it too much about that, but aside from that, I think the depiction of violence was really interesting in both. I think there was actually a lack of depiction of violence in both films. Even in The Searchers, where they have those gunfights, they're kind of at a distance, but then you don't see that family get slaughtered. You see the aftermath. You don't see him get slaughtered. You don't see Scar actually get killed by Martin, who shoots him. You don't see what happened to Lucy in that canyon. John Wayne just rides out of the canyon. So, there's kind of a lack of the real violence in there. And there's, once again, in Unforgiven, it's the same way. There's this lack of violence until the very end. It's like they're trying to stay away from it, and then you just can't do it. So yeah, I think I don't know. It's a really kind of. I don't know. I'm done. I've lost it. Can't go any further.
We've melted his brain, guys.
Melted.
Yeah. Success. Well, I'd like to briefly talk about the music in both films, and did anybody else feel like the music was a little bit distracting in The Searchers?
Oh my God! From right away, it was like, okay, let's wait till we swell with the score. Right.
Well, and then it would switch between kind of like almost overly dramatic, kind of melodramatic, and then it would switch to kind of like whimsical and that kind of thing. And I found, and I think it was the time period. That's how movie music was done. For a long time up to that period of time, and probably for a while afterward. But I found it kind of distracting. However, I remember really liking at least parts of the music in Unforgiven, especially what we were talking about, the bookend scenes where it shows that that beautiful sunset and the words are scrolling up. There's this simple like Spanish guitar kind of sound, and I really, really liked that.
You know why you like that, Gabe?
Why did I
Because it was
like
written
that?
by Clint Eastwood.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought this up. When I was watching Unforgiven, it kind of hit me the lack of music.
Yeah,
They really use silence and the surrounding ambient noise to fill in the gaps instead of music.
And another movie that I noticed that where they used music very sparingly and very appropriately, but almost the environment was kind of the soundtrack. Was kind of the music. It was the Coen Brothers one with Javier Bardem.
No Country for Old Men.
Yeah, No Country for Old Men. And there were times when they were kind of out in the wilderness and that kind of thing, and there was just no music. But you felt like there was this rhythm still, though. There was a rhythm to the sounds of nature, and that was what was providing kind of the soundtrack. And I feel like it was very similar in Unforgiven. It was used sparingly and in just the right places.
I thought it was interesting in the Searchers. There's a moment that I don't know if George Lucas kind of borrowed on for Star Wars, but when John Wayne comes home to see the kind of homestead being burned, it reminded me of the Lars homestead in Star Wars and imagery.
There is tons of Star Wars buried in the Searchers.
Mm-hmm.
Examples? You can't just say that. You got to have examples.
There's the whole connection of the sister being taken away by the bad guys, and then the two heroes that venture off to go get her and bring her back. I mean, the plot of Star Wars is actually really parallel to the Searchers. I mean,
do you
Star
think
Wars
that,
is just a space western.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it is really.
It is.
Do you think that has something to do with the whole grounding in kind of mythological storytelling?
Yeah, absolutely.
Even the
Joseph
Searchers
Campbell
was probably borrowing.
Yeah,
on a certain level.
Campbell's stuff is all over both of these movies, I think.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't be so much in Searchers, but a lot of those themes, carry through. So,
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
But one thing I wondered in that scene that Sam was mentioning, where they come up on the homestead burning, is if you were out in the wide open spaces like that, they came up over the hill and they acted like they were surprised to see it burning. But wouldn't you have seen smoke for like miles out there? Would you not have had like a sinking feeling for a long time as you approached? Do you think? I don't know. I just thought it shouldn't be a surprise because they could probably see the smoke forever.
Well, you have to understand, this is a group of people who saw the Native Americans as the aggressors. So, seeing how they were here first, it seems like they're pretty easily confused. So, they probably just thought it was a large cloud.
Or maybe just a campfire. They're just cooking.
Yeah.
I think it was a stock reaction. It seems like in any of those westerns, even when you're expecting it, they come up with a rise. You get that reaction shot. I mean, it's like that in hundreds of westerns. You always get that reaction shot for seeing something horrific. It was a stock reaction.
Yeah.
But to speak to I think that the Searchers is very bipolar, especially Gabe when you're talking about like the music. I mean, it's really dark. And then I feel like they're like, oh, we got to throw some humor in here, like that wedding/fight scene.
Right.
The music was very playful and
yeah,
it made no sense. And right before that, I can't remember what was going on, but it was dark. I mean, the movie's so dark, and then there are these moments of humor that just don't fit at all. But I think there's like, well, we got to throw some lightheartedness in there somewhere.
Right, and I think that's one of the things that bothered me about the Searchers in general is that it did seem kind of like. The humorous points really didn't fit. They stood out too much and they seemed awkward, and it seemed forced, And maybe they felt like, oh, we don't want to make this movie too dark because audiences won't go to see it. If it's too heavy, they won't enjoy it. And who knows what audiences at that time were looking for, Whereas I felt like Unforgiven was had a very dark tone to it as well, but it did inject humor at times, but it was more well placed and it was more subtle. Mm-hmm. It wasn't this kind of over the top goofy. Oh, we're gonna have kind of a fight. We're gonna have these two clumsy characters, kind of fight with each other, and it'll be kind of a comedy break. It was kind of like Sam was talking about before, the masturbation jokes and that kind of stuff thrown in there a little more subtly. And, so I felt like it was Unforgiven was more effective in that regard.
You broke the show, Gabe. Thanks.
I did. I do that all the time.
That's why I always
eat your
cut you off.
breakfast.
Thank you, Gabe.
Yeah, I'm good at it.
All right, you guys want to add anything else to the overall category?
Nope.
Nope. All right, let's put it to a vote. Tim.
Given.
Gabe.
We often talk about rewatchability in this overall kind of category, and I think I would definitely watch Unforgiven many more times in the future than I would The Searchers. So I have to go with Unforgiven.
All right. Sam?
Unforgiven as well.
And Tom.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go Unforgiven as well. So.
All right. Well, instead of trivia about both films, I'm going to give you the AFI's top 10 Westerns of all time. And we'll start with number 10, which is Cat Ballou. Number 9, Stagecoach. Number 8, Maccabee and Miss Miller. Number 7, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Number 6, The Wild Bunch. Number 5, Red River. Number 4, Unforgiven. Number 3, Shane. Number 2, High Noon. And number 1, The Searchers.
Bullocks. That's where you would say bullocks. Just so you know.
Now, yeah, I've seen maybe 8 of these films.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever
seen
seen Cat Ballou or, you know what? Cat Ballou or Maccabee and Miss Miller. McCabe? Is it McCabe?
Sorry, Mike.
Yep. No, you're fine. If I'm saying it wrong, trust me. You could say that. McCabe and Miss Miller. I've never seen that or Cat Ballou.
I've not. I can't even say I've heard of them.
You haven't heard it? Cat Ballou is hilarious.
Doesn't that have Jane Fonda in it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jane Fonda's in it. Yeah, Cat Ballou is fantastic.
I've never seen it.
Okay.
I would like to, but I've just
Cat
never
Ballou
watched it.
and Cheyenne Social Club's another really funny Western with Jimmy Stewart. So.
Oh, Jimmy Stewart.
Uh-oh. Is it coming?
Well, I got kind of sick the last Western I did. I had to have some soup. Someone was nice enough to make me some home cooking soup. It was wonderful soup.
All right, let's move on to recommendations for this month, and we will start with Gabe.
Well, I've always liked Westerns as kind of a platform for kind of telling morality tales. And I feel like they often fall into that category. I mean, Unforgiven definitely fell into that category. You could maybe make an argument for that with the Searchers. So the West, I'm going to suggest another Western, and it's one that definitely falls into that category, and it's the latest incarnation of 3:10 to Yuma. I went to that. I'm not a huge fan of what's his name?
Carrot Top.
No, I'm not. Russell Crowe. I'm not a huge fan of Carrot Top either. But I don't remember him in that movie. I'm not a huge fan of Russell Crowe, and I went thinking I might not really enjoy the movie, but I ended up liking it quite a lot more than I expected, and it definitely falls into that category of kind of using kind of the Western to highlight some moral dilemma, and it focuses a lot on what does it mean to be a man, what does it mean to be a parent, what does it mean to be a good person, what does it mean to be a bad person, that kind of thing, and I just really thought it was well done, and I think I've seen it a couple of times, and I've enjoyed it each time I've seen it. So I would highly recommend, if you haven't seen the latest version of 3:10 to Yuma, you should check it out.
I enjoy that film as well. Just saying. I think you and I went and saw it together, didn't we, Gabe?
Yeah, I think maybe we did.
Yeah.
Did we? Yeah. I did not have high expectations for it, but I ended up really liking it.
Yep. All right, Tom.
My favorite Western we actually covered tonight. Unforgiven's my favorite Western, but my second favorite Western is the 2007 film The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. And I would have to say that this is probably one of the most beautiful films shot in the last 20 years. It is done by Roger Deakins, who is one of the best, probably the best cinematographer working today. And if you're looking for a film that captures those big wide vistas and those beautiful landscapes, this is the movie for you. At the heart of it is a story of fame and notoriety and jealousy, and it is just an absolutely amazing story. You got to kind of get up and walk around halfway through it, though, because it does run 2 hours and 40 minutes. And there's a rumor that there's a 4.5 hour version out there somewhere, and I would love to sit down and see that, because every frame of this movie is just beautifully shot. And Roger Deakins is one of those people. Some people have directors or actors where they see every single movie. I love seeing Roger Deakins' work, even when he helps with the animation stuff, like he did for How to Train Your Dragon and Rise of the Guardians. So I would recommend Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford.
So you're saying the movie is as long as its title?
Yes, the title is representative of how long the movie is itself, and it's such a beautiful movie. Absolutely, just stunning to watch.
Now, I want to ask you, Tom, have you seen the animated take on the ending, or on what happens with them between Yogi Bear and Boo Boo?
Yogi Bear and Boo Boo. Yes, I have. And it's God. Please don't watch that before you watch the movie.
I agree. Watch the film first.
This movie made such an impression that somebody made a computer animated Yogi Bear version of it. So, I mean, Come on. Hello. Yes. How could you not watch it?
All right, Sam.
All right. Well, I don't watch Westerns that often, so I was glad I got a chance to do so on this podcast, but definitely moving on from the Western. If you want to laugh and have a good time and you happen to have Netflix, you have to check out Aziz Ansari's new show that was taped at Madison Square Garden. It is just, it's just pure joy. It's really good to laugh. It's just under an hour, right at 58 minutes. And it's one of the things I think that helps push this continuing new stream of content, such as comedy performance, that Netflix is continuing to be very innovative with. But it's funny. And I think if you like his stuff, you'll love the set at Madison Square Garden. So check him out on Netflix.
All right. I do enjoy him on Parks and Recreation, which is over now. Made me sad. But yeah, I'm going to have to check it out. I checked out Nick Offerman's, not really stand-up, but his performance piece that he did, and I really enjoyed that. Of course, I'm a huge Ron Swanson fan and Nick Offerman fan, so I have to try that out. Tim?
I got two, actually. So my favorite Western when I was growing up was Silverado, Lawrence Kasdan's Silverado.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't seen that, but gosh, it's like they took a John Ford Western and kind of remade it in the 80s. It's got all the fixings of a classic Western, and it's got an amazing cast. You got Scott Glenn, Kevin Costner, Kevin Kline, Danny Glover, Brian Dennehy. He plays a great bad guy. It's just fantastic.
It even has Jeff Goldblum in it.
It does have. Yep, he's a card shark. He's that old gambler moving into town. But it's just a lot of fun, fantastic movie. And then my current favorite Western of all time is the classic TV miniseries Lonesome Dove. If you haven't seen Lonesome Dove,
fine choices. Those are good
my
choices.
God, I love.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Both of those are good job.
That's what I got.
All right, well, now I've got to pick a better one. No, I'm kidding. If any of you listening to this are from Iowa and you've ever watched the fair coverage on Iowa Public Television, you will recognize the theme song for this movie I'm going to talk about. It's called How the West Was Won. And it was one of the first films shot in 70 millimeter. And in fact, in most of the larger cities, they actually had two screens together to show the film because it was such a wide aspect ratio. And as many of you know, my father is the one that introduced me to all these films, and I always remember him talking about seeing it before he went over to Germany to serve his time in the army. And he just always talked about how large the theater was and about how they had these 2 screens to show the film on. And in some of the production or some of the reproductions that you can either get on DVD or Blu-ray or whatnot, and sometimes even on, if you catch it on TV, you can actually see the line where the film, was merged together to form this 70 millimeter giant aspect ratio back then. Of course, IMAX shoots 70 millimeter now, doesn't it? Am I correct in that?
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the same aspect ratio, is it?
Right. I don't know about that, but it's just, you want to talk about wide scope. This film is it. I mean, it had 4 directors. Yeah, John Ford, Henry Hathaway, George Marshall, and Richard Thorpe. And it had all the who's who that were in Hollywood at the time. Henry Fonda, Carl Malden, Gregory Peck, George Papard, Robert Preston, Debbie Reynolds, James Stewart, Eli Wallach, John Wayne, Harry Morgan, Spencer Tracy. It just goes on and on and on. And it's great pieces about America's frontiersmen, whether it was sailing down not sailing, but going down the river, hauling cargo, or the Civil War, or killing buffalo, hunting the buffalo. It's just a spectacular piece. And just like Tom's recommendation, it is a long film. It's 164 minutes.
Wow.
But it is totally worth it. Just the scope of the film just makes it feel enormous. So my recommendation is How the West Was Won. So let's move on to who won. Ready for this? Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Your winner by decision is Unforgiven!
Let's go ahead and go with where people can find you. Sorry, I had a frog in my throat. Where people can find you on the internet, or if they want to come hang out with you at home, or just peek through your windows like I do with Tom. We'll start with Gabe.
You can find me on Facebook, or you can check out some of our 48-hour films on onegenomeshort.com.
All right. Sam.
Don't come to my home. You could probably find me on Facebook. And if you want to be part of the 48-hour film project in Des Moines this summer, you can find information there at 48hourfilm.com/Des Moines.
All right. Tom?
Cheshire Moon Films on Vimeo and Facebook. And I'm sad to say this is my last podcast from Polk Drive. From now on, we'll be recording out at my new studio in North Ames. So I'm very excited about that. So if you want to come hang out over there, that's awesome. Just got a nice big TV in there, Blu-ray. Hang out in the front lobby there and watch the movies. It'll be awesome.
Do you have scotch?
I have Cut Spike whiskey from Nebraska. It's actually quite good.
Okay.
So,
well, I'll try some of that, but I'll bring some scotch.
Okay.
All right. And Mr. Nash.
You can find me on Facebook, but you can also find Back Row Studios on Facebook. And more importantly, check out the Facebook page for Up on the Wooftop, a fine family film that will be coming out next Christmas that involves both Mr. Mike Keeler and Mr. Sam Pastwami. So, yeah, please check us out.
Yeah, well, thanks, number one, for being on, Tim, and thanks for having Sam and I be a part of the film. We had a lot of fun. 2-week feature.
Oh,
it was a pleasure, albeit a stressful one. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me pull up my notes here. Well, we would appreciate it if you could leave us a review on iTunes or whatever podcasting service you use. You can contact us at cinesmack@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Just search Cinesmack. And for April, we go back to the 90s as the Muscles from Brussels takes on the great one, That's right, Hard Target versus Under Siege. And we are also going to have a guest host where I actually get to judge these two films. So for Gabe, Tom, Sam, Tim, and myself, thanks for listening, and go catch a flick.
You just shot an unarmed man. Well, he should have harmed himself.
All right, give me a second. Why don't you take your hands off her tits, Pilgrim?
This has been a test of the Southsider Studios podcast system. This was only a test. If this were a true lack of entertainment, your head would explode. Go to iTunes and subscribe to our feed. Just search Southsider Studios.